Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Sustainable aviation fuel could emerge as the next opportunity for substantial growth in U.S. biofuels production, and agricultural feedstocks are poised to play a leading role in the supply chain for domestic SAF production. Joining us today to discuss this is Jacqui Fatka, farm supply and biofuels economist with CoBank. Welcome, Jacqui. Great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Glad to be here.
For those of you that are tuning in, we thank you for being here. If you have any questions for Jacqui, feel free to post those there in the chat area on your screen. If you're joining us from social media, simply post your questions directly in those channels. So, Jacqui, CoBank has just released a new report titled Charting the Path Forward for SAF. I got to get those right. And it really explores the sustainable aviation fuel market and its impact on the U.S. ag economy. The future looks good, but why don't you jump in and talk to us about what you're seeing? And I know there's some challenges too, so let's talk about those.
Yeah, so really the big push that started with the SAF market that we are hoping to capitalize on today really started within the Biden administration's claim in 2021, the 3 billion grand challenge, the SAF grand challenge of trying to get 3 billion gallons of SAF by 2030. And so now, as we are a couple years into that goal and some significant incentives that have been put forward in the Inflation Reduction Act, now is a really good time to take notice of whether we are able to reach that goal, and is it even achievable. And I think there are some pros and cons. There are some good things. There is some momentum, but we also have a lot of tailwinds, headwinds that we're facing within this to try to get us to really have a takeoff and reach that 3 billion gallon goal.
Yeah, there was a goal for 2030 and a goal for 2050, I believe, which was 35 billion gallons. You think we're on track, or you think you mentioned there's a few things we need to work through?
You know, when you look at what we have historically, when that goal was introduced in 2021, we had just 5 million gallons. So you think 5 million versus 3 billion. So drop in the bucket. Now we are 10 times that for the first half of this year, but 10 times 5 is only 52 million gallons that we had for the first half. So again, still really a drop in the bucket. And what we are seeing here as we look forward, we need several different things to come together to get to that 3 billion goal. We've got to have government incentives that help push this along. We need to have offtake agreements from airlines to be able to say, yes, we're going to buy that. And then we need to make sure that those targets are again, reachable, right? So having goals, sometimes this is a voluntary approach, and do we need to have a mandatory approach? And another big part within the government incentives, you know, we've got some tax credits right now that are just 3 years from 2025 to 2027. That's really too short of a time. And that's something from CoBank standpoint as well. We need a longer runway. We need at least, you know, probably even 10 years to have something that we can see, have that momentum continue to really get it through 2030 and even beyond.
Where would you say you mentioned the aviation industry? Where are they in terms of their acceptance of sustainable aviation fuel? Where are they like on board, or are they kind of like hanging back?
So, you know, the airline industry is in a unique situation. They know that if they promise to get SAF, that it's going to cost them more. The cost to produce sustainable aviation fuel is more than what they would pay otherwise for their diesel today. So they are making some promises to incorporate that, because a lot of them are coming under requirements. You know, we mentioned our mandates are not a mandate, it's a volunteer. But EU is going to have 2%. So some of these airlines know that they have to do that, but it's going to cost them. And so they've got to be able to pass that on, whether that's a higher ticket cost. I don't know if you've noticed this, but as you start to buy airline tickets now, they're starting to report those greenhouse emissions. They're trying to help people be aware of what kind of footprint they have when they purchase those tickets. But airlines today, it's about 0.17% of their fuel is used, that's SAF. But then we see some exciting things, like you just recently here in the last couple of weeks, Minneapolis Airport and Detroit's airport have purchased some SAF from some camel producers to be able to supply Midway and Chicago Midway Airport, and they have an agreement with Valero and Darling to purchase some SAF. So you're starting to see some airlines make some of those offtake agreements, and that's what we're going to need. As I said, it's got to take a lot of different things to all come together to reach that goal. So we're seeing some good direction. But again, we need the cost to go down to produce SAF. We need the airlines to say, yep, we're going to buy that. And some of that is going to take some unique venture capital money to come in. It's going to come in with being able to have folks say, yes, we want this. We know we are going to want this. We also can't have moving guidepost of, okay, we say we want this now, but oh, we're short. So we're going to move that guidepost down the road.
Do you think that guidepost is going to change at all if we have a different administration come in here? It's election day, so we never know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say a big driver of the current sustainable aviation fuel market right now, there's a 40B tax credit, which was one of the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. And if you remember correctly, I was actually at Feedstocks covering that vote. Could not believe that Inflation Reduction Act vote was finalized, but the deciding vote was Vice President Harris. She was the vote that allowed that bill to go through. And, I would expect the Biden administration policies that helped push some of these tax incentives for the 40B, as well as its predecessor, the 45Z, to be continued under a Harris administration. Now, we have heard some criticism from these green climate goals and the incentives that were put into place from Trump. But we also know when the House tried to vote down the entire Inflation Reduction Act, there were many House Republicans that stepped up and said, hey, we really actually want to keep this tax incentive. So I think we could see some cherry picking of some of these tax incentives, components of that Inflation Reduction Act that have bipartisan support. Because when you look at biofuels and the ability to hopefully meet that demand, a lot of those Republicans in those Midwest states are those who would be supportive of that. So, if Trump wins, today is election day, if Trump wins today, I think maybe that is a little bit more of a tempered future for this. But again, there's bipartisan support. And if you have these airlines who are saying that they're going to continue with that, then maybe there is some opportunity to create some different ways. But the government does play a key role at this. If you look back at the ethanol industry, they needed some tax incentives to get themselves off the ground, improve efficiencies, and no longer require them to really depend on the government to prop them up. And prop them up is probably not the right word, but we have a similar situation now with SAF. We've got to really have that government incentive to help build that momentum, improve efficiencies so we can get to that goal. And at the end of the day, commodity prices are low. We need a new demand base. We need something to go back and really build back some new demand for our very productive corn and soybean producers here in the country.
And that rolls right into my next question on commodity prices. We've got low commodity prices. Is SAF a short-term solution, or is it something that's just going to take a while and we really shouldn't be saying, hey, here's our savior?
As much as I know everybody wants that short-term savior, no, it's going to take some time. And, again, you look at what we had from 2021, where we just had 5 million gallons and we're at 52 million gallons now of SAF. We're still a drop in the bucket, but we could start to really expand. And also part of this whole discussion too is not just SAF, but renewable diesel, and being able to build both renewable diesel and SAF. I think right now the most cost-efficient process of SAF is using the same feedstocks that we do in renewable diesel, but we really can't stop renewable diesel, the growth that we're seeing there, and the inclusion of those oils such as soy oil and even the distiller's corn oil off of the ethanol process, as well as used cooking oil and tallow. Those are the ones in the HEFA process that we're using in SAF. The alcohol to jet process is further, or it's further behind, and so we really haven't. It's much higher cost to produce that today. So again, I think corn producers are probably needing a better savior, and it's going to even take longer for corn producers to be able to be part of that future SAF market just based on what we have today. We only have about 600 million gallons of potential alcohol to jet, and again, it's going to take more time to get those costs down, tweak some things, get pilot projects really expanded to a more of a large scale commercial sized operation for those alcohol to jet SAF plants.
So where is the US on a global basis in that SAF market?
Right now, we're working things out, but you look over at New Zealand. LanzaJet is one of those companies that has an alcohol to jet facility down in Georgia, opened earlier this year. They're actually bringing in some Brazilian sugar cane to run that, but I've also heard too they're just working that through the system. But LanzaJet has got other facilities in New Zealand that they are improving upon. You look at China, and so much has been said this year about the used cooking oil and the imports of used cooking oil from China and how that's displaced soybean oil. And even though it has created more competition in soybean oil for renewable diesel, I think China is going to start to really build up their own personal sustainable aviation fuel market. So we're probably going to see less of their supplies coming over here compared to what they are today. You look at Brazil too, they're also building up their sustainable aviation fuel market. They're building a lot of their own corn ethanol production plants, not just their sugarcane plants. When you look at the productive capacity to increase corn production there in Brazil, a lot of opportunities for them. And they are continuing to really look at that as a demand builder there as well. So I think you see a lot of other countries who are building it up. One thing about the US, though, we use a lot of airline fuel here domestically. So if we can position those plants close to proximity wise where they are needed, those airports, I think that's where you might have some opportunities, right? Being able to capitalize on the fact that we don't need to export our SAF, but we have a really big demand base here. So let's create those plants, put those plants very close proximity to where they would be used, because that's an added cost too. Being able to get that SAF quickly to the airport where it can, because you'll also reduce the cost there. It doesn't make sense probably to put an SAF in the middle of Iowa. There's not a lot of fuel use there, despite Des Moines being an up and coming metro area. When you look at Chicago and some of those other greater areas, that's why you're seeing it in Minneapolis and Detroit and Chicago. You're close to some of those areas that have the feedstocks, those ag feedstocks, but you're also close to those airports that have a lot of people coming in and out.
So you look at the broader picture, not just biofuels. So you're looking at farm supply, farm inputs. We just talked about the election, but let's just make sure. Is there anything else that we should be watching as we see what comes out of this election? Anything that you're really saying, hey, we need to watch fertilizer, or we need to watch propane, or anything you're really keeping your eye on and seeing how this might go?
Well, as it's a similar discussion of sustainability and where companies are willing to pay for sustainability and regenerative ag. When you look at, a lot of companies are wanting to pay farmers to help encourage their adoption of regenerative ag and conservation practices. But it takes 5 to 7 years sometimes for that to happen. And again, you go back to that 2030, and this isn't necessarily election driven, but there's definitely more incentives that have been rolled out for conservation and ag practices within this Biden administration. So that's one thing that I would say, where sustainability goes going forward, how farmers are equipped with the knowledge. I've been saying too that ag retailers play a really important place. they are trusted by farmers. They are heard. They like that in-person interaction. So ag retailers and how they interact with farmers to help educate them on agronomic things that also have a sustainable component as well, and maybe finding some new revenue streams. The elections today, I will say I'm a little concerned about some of the comments coming out from the potential role that RFK Jr. could play in a Trump administration. When you start hearing things about him wanting to get rid of all pesticides, wanting to get rid of a lot of the way that today's agriculture is functioning well and able to produce so much. So I think that's something we're going to be watching. A lot is going on too with the Endangered Species Act and how the EPA is managing those pesticides and herbicide regulations. I think that's something, Trump was definitely in the role of trying to deregulate things. But then when you hear what RFK Jr. is, that's been a little anti that, might be more regulations. So we're going to watch to see how that all comes out. Definitely something that is a little disheartening at times, because it could definitely be a major disruption that could be coming. And at the end of the day, I don't think that that's good for agriculture. So we hope that the common sense will prevail. I think today is election day. We're going to not have probably all the answers today or, even this week. But you do know that there's some good people on both sides of this issue. I mean, Secretary Vilsack and the staff at USDA has been really great to help with some of these conservation efforts here. I would say rural America has done well, but Trump, there's very different policies on trade. I mean, I think we're all watching to see what happens with this election with trade, right? There's some concerning things that could come or not come due to trade. And that's really important to farmers across the country.
Lots of things to watch, lots of excitement ahead, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Jacqui. Thank you for your time today.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Always great to talk with you, Sarah.
Jacqui Fatka of CoBank. And thank you all for your time today, for tuning in and giving us just a little bit of your day. For Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.